Well, in the interest of making sure that our speakers here have the full time available, I'm going to go ahead and introduce everyone now. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dina Novak. I am the Director of Instructional Design with University Online Education Services at Rutgers University. And on behalf of our 2025 Online Learning Conference, I am so happy to welcome Eliza, Blau, and Pauline Carpenter from the School of Arts and Sciences Teaching and Learning team at Rutgers University. We are thrilled to have them moderate a panel discussion titled Beyond Design, Engaging Interactions in Asynchronous Courses. During the presentation, please use the live chat session. You can pose any questions you have there in the chat, and the presenters will answer as time permits. So I'm happy to turn it over to them now, and enjoy.
Thank you, Dina. So welcome everyone to our panel discussion, Beyond Design, Engaging Interactions in Asynchronous Courses. We're so excited to be here today with all of you and to hear from a panel of experienced Rutgers faculty who have incorporated various interactive strategies into their online asynchronous courses to engage learners after they participated in an online asynchronous teaching course run by the School of Arts and Sciences Office of Undergraduate Education. So Pauline and I are both instructional design and technology specialists from the School of Arts and Sciences, and we will be moderating this panel today.
Great, thanks Eliza, and welcome everyone. We're really happy to be here. And you could see on our previous screen that we shared that we have some panelists with us, and we're going to jump right into it by inviting our panelists to introduce themselves. So please take 1 to 2 minutes to introduce yourself, your context at Rutgers, and briefly share about the online course that you teach. And I'm going to go ahead and, I thought I was going to paste that into the chat. Here we go. And let's start with, I'm just going to go on the screen who I see in order. So for me, that is Crystal.
Hi, everybody. I am Crystal Pletka. I am an assistant teaching professor in the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Rutgers, the School of Arts and Sciences. And I teach an online course called Dinosaurs. There is also in-person sections of this, and it is a very large capacity course, in person and online. And so that is what I primarily do and what I did with the strategic development program, but I also teach online versions of Planet Earth and some other of our online offerings.
Thank you, Crystal. And next up is Tom.
Hi all, my name is Thomas Moomjy. I'm a lecturer in the Department of American Studies here at Rutgers University. I teach a course called 21st Century Expressions, which is largely about the growth of the internet over the past 40 years or so, but we delve back a little bit more than that. Doing the course development was actually really enlightening for me. And I think I should mention that a lot of my previous experience comes from teaching English composition at other places, and that is always informing where I'm at.
Great, thanks, Tom. Next up, we have Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie Stevens. I'm an associate professor in the history department, and I teach a couple of online courses, but the course I've really focused on in the last kind of year in terms of redesigning is a survey of the making of modern in India and Pakistan from about 1500 to the present, with an enrollment of about 75 to 100 students. I've taught the course many times in person, but have really gotten interested in the sort of transition to doing it in an online format.
Great, thank you, Julie. And next up is Ashley.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ashley Koning. I'm the director of the Eagleton Center for Public Interest Polling at the Eagleton Institute of Politics over on Douglas, and I'm also an assistant research professor there. I had originally started out actually teaching survey methods for the political science department in person, and then obviously the pandemic hit and we transitioned the course online. I was teaching survey method, or I was teaching introduction to research methods, and now it has turned into a survey methods course because I do surveys. Now it's survey research. I'm the only, not only online course, but the only asynchronous online course for the methods requirement for the political science department.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And do we have Rashida? Any luck with Rashida joining? So we have one more panelist who may be able to join us soon. So if she does come in, we will make sure to give her a chance to introduce herself.
Great. Thank you, Pauline. And thank you to the panelists for your introductions. We're excited to hear from you. And we'll leave some space for Rashida if she's able to get logged onto the system. So the first question we're going to ask you is about student engagement in the online asynchronous environment. So we'll ask you, how do you know your students are engaged in your online course? And also, if you could briefly share how your understanding of what it means to be engaged in an online course has changed over time. So I am pasting that question in the chat as well, so we can all see it. And if anybody wants to start us off, if you want to unmute, so you can kick us off.
I guess I will start there. I think I know students are engaged and really involved when they actually respond to posts and discussions and assignments and even announcements and emails with more than just the "how do I do this?" or "can I get an extension?" because that is most of the interactions previously. But now they're really replying with, "Oh, that's really cool because of this," or they're putting some type of personal antidote in, or really diving into the material and they're thinking about how it applies to them. And honestly, I teach dinosaurs, so not a whole lot applies to them, but they're also evaluating how it applies to their preconceived notions and even in science in general, or what they thought and how things are changing. And that's really interesting to me because I'm seeing these students really engaging. They're really taking something from the course, even if they're just taking it for a natural science requirement, but they're obviously interacting with the material and getting something from it now. And I think I'm seeing that in their responses.
Great. Thank you, Crystal. Sounds like they're making a lot of connections.
I just wanted to chime in that I have my students do group work. So this is, I think it's specific to the survey research course now that I teach. I didn't really do this as much in the prior course, but essentially they work with clients throughout the entire semester. So the activities are set up where if their group members unfortunately fail them or they're not communicating properly, I'm going to turn my camera off just because I'm starting to lag. If they're not communicating, they can be individualized assignments. And so they have the ability to kind of go on their own if necessary. But I would say probably 90% of the time, the groups work so well together. I was just grading weekly wrap-ups and they get so excited over their group members and rave about their group members, and especially working with, real people as in clients and organizations within New Jersey. So they're quote unquote lovingly, forced to communicate with one another. And so it's a really unique, interesting thing to see because they're kind of interacting in a way like they would in a real class.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. Rashida, if you want to hop in and introduce yourself, we'd love for you to do that. Maybe you still need a few minutes to get all the settings figured out. But so to sort of reach Ashley, it sounds like your students are doing group work and you're having them do weekly wrap-ups to stay engaged throughout the asynchronous course. I'm going to just re-highlight the question here. So if somebody, Julie or Tom, if you want to jump in.
I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I think one of the things that really changed in how I understood student interaction in an online course is I think sort of previously, particularly based on my experience teaching online during the pandemic, I was thinking about it as pretty formalized, posting responses in forums, joining online office hours. And one of the things that the summer course really helped me to develop is more of a kind of sense of informal interactions and sort of personalized interactions. So I really remember watching this particular video about making sort of online content for students, in which it really sort of encouraged you to be very natural and very unscripted and sort of unpolished. And I think it was Eliza and Pauline had a sample video in which an Amazon delivery happened. And I sort of really leaned into posting some of these short, 2 minutes, this is how I'm feeling this week. And it was really amazing to watch how that really led students to also open up and to post ways in, how they were feeling, how they were connecting with the material in a way that felt much more animated and personalized. So that was really for me, a real transition in online teaching is realizing that if I opened up and allowed my students to really see me as this dynamic, kind of flawed, but maybe even a little bit funny person, that they would kind of mirror that, and that I felt like I more had people in my class rather than just sort of chat bots.
Great, thank you, Julie. Yes.
There's something that happens in an in-person class of when you, the professor, or you, the teacher, don't know something. And you can have that play out in front of a group of people in an in-person class. And it happens in a kind of magical way. There's an alchemy to it that I can't quite describe. Online, and this is weird for me because part of what I'm trying to get students to realize is that your online experience is highly subjective. So I'm asking them to kind of lean into their own subjectivity, but then interrogate it. And when someone says to me or says to the group, I don't know, that's when I know that they're actually getting it, which is strange because it's well, what don't you know? And then that opens up another place.
Yes, and I think one thing that's wonderful about students admitting that they don't know anything is it speaks to the safety that they feel in being able to do so. So this is great. I'm hearing a lot of humanizing strategies. That's one of my favorite pieces of advice is if you make a mistake or your video is not super polished, that actually helps. And also it's less time consuming. So it's win-win for everyone. So thanks so much for sharing, everyone. And now we kind of started to get into this a little bit, but now we're interested in one or two successful strategies that you have used that enhance interaction in your course. And I'm going to go ahead and post that.
If you guys don't mind, I'll dive in, and it's all thanks to Eliza and Pauline. The weekly wrap-ups and the discussion posts are just invaluable. I try to change up the weekly wrap-up prompt every week based on what we did during the week. And in terms of the discussion posts, I try to make them, I try to make them very interactive where, sometimes one student will have to post a frequency or some sort of statistical test or some sort of syntax, that code that they're writing up, and the other student has to respond to it. So not even, and a lot of that is the uniqueness of the course and the course material, but not even hey, respond to somebody, but more it's almost like they're pieces of a puzzle that they have to fit into one another, to try to really get them to communicate and have the communication valuable. We do this M&M activity about sampling and showing how, M&Ms can be kind of a sample for the entire population of M&Ms in the world. And they had to count up fake M&Ms that I made on PDFs for them. And they had to respond to each other and add up their M&Ms. So Pauline and Eliza, I credit you guys with that so much because it really makes them talk to one another every single week in multiple ways.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing.
I kind of want to piggyback on what Julie was saying earlier, in addition to some other things. Something I have found oddly helpful is I do weekly video announcements. I record myself, and this is me being sick and looking like myself whenever I decide to record the video. And often, again, not making light, but this is what you get. This is what you get when you have me in person. This is what you get when you have me online. And I have gotten comments on surveys and such at the end of the class that they enjoyed that they got to put a face to the name. Because with prior so many online courses, there is no interaction. You have no idea who's teaching you. And I think just those videos and being like, here's how we're going to do this assignment. This is what's coming up this week. We don't have any assignments, but here's some catch-ups. And this is what where we should be at, as one thing. But then also when I do discussion posts, I have rubrics set up in the assignments so that when they're discussing and they're replying to each other, they have to interact and engage. They have to be reading the entire thing and engaging with multiple people. And I think that has been a nice strategy to incorporate along with the, hi, this is me.
Yes, the video announcements are great. And I think what happens too is instructors, when they're teaching online, they're putting so much work into things, but it's not always evident to the learners. And so if we're intentional about showing ourselves, we can accomplish that human or that instructor and student interaction more. And Rashida, I think I saw your video. So does that mean that you are fully with us? And if you are, we invite you to introduce yourself and your course. Okay, so maybe it's tricky getting on. We can also do through chat too, Rashida, if you want to share about your course and about yourself in your chat. And if any of these questions are something you want to speak to, that can be another way that you can share your success strategies. Oh, okay, maybe she'll be back. All right, did anybody else want to respond to this? Julie.
I've experimented with having students keep an engagement diary over the course of the semester and just write a couple of, short, even like fragments of sentences about how they were engaging with the material during the week. And I was really nervous about how this would go, but it ended up being like one of the best parts of the class. And like reading the engagement diaries at the end of the semester, I was just like really like awed by sort of hearing that like personal story of how the students experienced the material and how they were finding ways in their lives, which I sort of encouraged them to do. Like, because I teach on India and Pakistan, I was like, go, there's a like, festival happening in Edison this week, maybe go and visit it. And during this semester, I was like, I don't know if I'm just like speaking, if any students are taking advantage of this. But then at the end of the semester, like many students had examples of how they sort of took those activity suggestions and then reflected on them. And students actually like did more reflection about how they were like experiencing the course than I even kind of expected. And so I think that gave them a way of sort of self-consciously like humanizing their learning and was really fulfilling, I think, both for the students and for me at the end of the semester to see that. Because sometimes during the semester in an online course, I sometimes feel like I'm not exactly sure like how the students are experiencing. And often like the student feedback in the kind of formal ways doesn't provide enough of that. So the engagement diaries seem to be helpful both for them and for me as an instructor.
Wow, that's interesting. What strikes me of that is I can see how that would enhance the relevance of your course too, like guiding students to make the connections with their lives. And Crystal, I think you also mentioned that you're intentional about that. Actually seeing evidence of engagement. And that's why we asked that question at the beginning, because oftentimes the students are engaged, but we just can't see it. And so it's nice to have it kind of documented because the instructor can see it, but also they can see it as well. And so Janice has a question. Was the engagement diary meant for a grade for participation? Okay. And yes, it was graded.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sort of like trying to do fine grain, like your participation is better, but I felt like I had to at least kind of like, I think I find often now if students don't see something as counting towards their grade, they don't really do it. So I found that having it be, I think it was like maybe 10% of the grade. So relatively low stakes, but still sort of it counted. And I think that kind of helps students to like rationalize why they were spending the time doing it.
Julie, I'm reminded I'm reminded of online education about like 10 years ago. And I keep thinking of this through like the prism of the experience of teaching English composition, because the rote experience was increased busy work. Like, okay, we can prove that we're interactive by increasing this, needless kind of stuff. And it being intentional, sort of low stakes, like it does something that's different. But what's weird about it is that there's this point where it's like, are they engaged? Like 3 or 4 weeks before the end of the semester, like, are they actually there? And then it turns out they actually are, more so than if you're just saying, okay, do this for 2 points.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Okay, and I think did everybody address that question? So I think we're actually good to move on. That is really helpful.
Great, thank you, everyone. And next, we want to ask you about feedback you have received from your learners after teaching or during the teaching your online course or after teaching your online course. What kind of feedback have you received from learners who have taken your course, and how has that impacted your online teaching strategy? So how have you taken some of their feedback and then adopted it in a future iteration of the course? So I'll post our question and highlight it so we can see it. And if anybody wants to get us started, you can unmute.
Well, I kind of already mentioned it, but in my surveys at the end of the semester, and on Reddit, there is a Rutgers Reddit, and I peruse it often because it entertains me greatly. But also it keeps me involved on what's going on campus that I don't see. But people have, said that they appreciate engaging in the material, that they got to interact. They knew who I was, even if they weren't seeing me in class, and that I was responsive and talking to them and helping them. But also just appreciating the activities and the assignments and kind of what they did. And that's shown up in the evaluations, and it has been a marked increase. And then on various Rate My Professor and the Reddit things. If you're ever curious and you're at Rutgers and you want to know how students think, don't check Rate My Professor, check Reddit.
Great, thanks. So Crystal, it sounds like a lot of that feedback, it reinforces, okay, these strategies I've been using are worthwhile and worth continuing in future semesters.
I think I may have been responsible for the deluge of can we build a monorail on the Rutgers Reddit? And then it was like, okay, can we build an airport between campuses? I usually find that like when a student engages with something that is uniquely theirs. I had a student that did a project on the evolution of blades of hockey sticks. And it was like, who knew that so much technology could be poured into this? And it was like taking this old analog thing, and it was like, it was so personalized, but it wouldn't have been meaningful if it wasn't that personal. So it's like when I get something like that, again, it's like, okay, this is working.
And Tom, is that like a student choice type of project where they get to select what they?
Yeah, I give them a good amount of freedom in choosing their final project. So we're kind of building up to the idea of like, you get to something that is your interaction between the online world and the offline world, and like mitigating that experience in between the two. It's very, very personal. So when it's just something like social media, it's like, okay, we all use social media. When it's something that's very personal, that it's like that you have a deep experience with, it's usually just a much better project and a much more interactive experience. Also, there's more interaction between the students that way, because it's like, oh, cool, look what this person just did.
Right. You get to learn about your peers, what their interests are, and things you might not know otherwise. Ashley or Julie, if you want to jump in.
unfortunately, I think the feedback sometimes from some students is they wish the class would be in person, especially because we're working with statistical software, and it's obviously hard for me to navigate statistics. I mean, I do it, but it's a different kind of navigation of statistical software without me there over their shoulder. And obviously we'll get on Zoom and we'll find out, but it does require them, and luckily Rutgers now offers it for free. It requires them to download SPSS on their computers. And so, in fact, I had one student who had to drop this semester, even though it's very blatantly in the syllabus, because she was not able to download the software and didn't have a laptop and so on and so forth. So, there is always that drawback. I think, we've certainly seen over the past 5 years that all of us can kind of do anything in any format when we have to and when push comes to shove. But I think the biggest feedback for the online portion is really more tutorials and videos. And so I've made sure that all of the assignments increasingly have tutorials, and there's helpful links or how to do stuff. So it's almost kind of like baby steps and making sure everything is spelled out because you're not there right in front of them. And so I try to improve the course every semester by making sure, all the right tutorials and helpful links are there so they can explore however their brain may work.
Great, thanks. It's the sort of helping us think about scaffolding and how much you need to scaffold in an online environment. And it's sometimes it's just easy to do over time, to iteratively to realize, okay, this section wasn't so clear, so now I should add more tutorial videos or instructions or guides for students along the way. Yeah, Julie.
Like on a really specific point, I found it really helpful to do a midterm course survey, which is something I did a lot when I first started teaching and kind of got out of the habit of doing, but then kind of did again with the online course this fall because I had done a major redesign. And I got some feedback that was like so surprising for me. Like I had a couple of students who complained that the quizzes were too short, which I was like, what? But then they basically said they wanted to have more questions on the quizzes, so they felt that each like individual question counted less. And that actually made a lot of sense. And I thought, well, you're like, these are teeny tiny quizzes that only count for a few points like each week, but still there were enough students who I think something about having a quiz that only had like, 4 or 5 questions like made them nervous. So, I mean, beyond that specific point, I found that doing some of the feedback at the midterm, like it reminded me of why that was important, because I kind of got some comments that I wouldn't really have otherwise anticipated from the students.
Great, and it's a way to actually make some slight adjustments for the students you have now, instead of, commonly we rely on their feedback for future semesters, but it's nice to have that mid-course survey to then, if you're able to, and if it's reasonable, right, make some adjustments. And that's funny, they want more quiz questions. All right, Pauline, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Eliza. And I see that there's some questions rolling into the chat. We actually have our final question. And so I'm going to invite all panelists to share their thoughts to this question. And then we'll open it up to any additional questions or comments that folks in the audience have for our panelists today. So the last question or prompt is, what is your one piece of advice that you would share with colleagues about using active learning strategies online? And I'm going to go ahead and paste that. One piece of advice that you would share with colleagues about using active learning strategies online.
I think this kind of ties into the last question for me as well. Organization is key. And again, I bow down to Pauline and Eliza for enhancing. And I'm a pretty type A person, and I like to think I'm organized, but you guys brought me to a whole other level. I have time and time again, even this far into this new era of, online courses that we have, students saying, you have such an organized course and that has been so helpful. And like, you know, or they'll even say like, oh, this is the most organized online course I've ever taken, which then makes me be like, what else is out there? But like making sure there is a pattern, there is a flow, that Monday morning email goes out every Monday, like that organization just keeps them going. And again, I think it's kind of that extra effort you have to do. Like Crystal was talking about with being face-to-face, that extra effort of like being in their face and being in it in an organized, systematic way, and kind of just having as many touchstones as possible, and just, you know, making sure they understand you're there for them and you're present, and trying to just put the information out step by step in multiple different ways. So yeah, I would say organization.
I want to just reiterate that as well, because I have gotten that back in feedback that they appreciate the layout of the class, the modules, organization, and that's a huge plus. My one piece of advice is, I would say 2 quotes. One from Finding Nemo, just keep going. Swimming, whatever works for you. And then also there's a scientific quote. It's, I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways it did not work. If something is not working for the class, it does not mean the active learning isn't going to work or engagement. It just means that particular thing does not work. Try something else. It's not failing, it's figuring out what works for you and your class. And if that doesn't work, if play pause it or weekly engagement, however you do it, doesn't work, try something else. And that's okay. It is okay to test it out and figure out what works best for you and your course and how you're teaching.
Kind of following up on that, don't be afraid to drop something. Like if it's not working, obviously you can't cancel your midterm. But if there's like a low stakes thing that's not getting the interaction that you want, like communicate that. And that makes a difference, because it also is a way of humanizing you.
I guess I can pop in just because it hasn't come up yet. I would say, like, I think everybody needs a strategy about AI. I think particularly in the online asynchronous environment, these courses are particularly sort of like vulnerable to sort of AI use. And I found that like I built a small assignment in which students were actually supposed to use, or at least it was an option for them to use AI. I did that in my course last semester, and I actually found that that seemed to tamp down on illicit use. I think it gave students the impression that I kind of was onto them, like I was somewhat savvy about AI, and that I would recognize if they were turning in AI assignments for writing assignments in which they weren't supposed to, because I was sort of created a space in the course in which they were actually allowed to use AI. I mean, this is for me very much a work in progress, but I'm teaching a different online course this semester, which has been built by a team, in which sort of the team of instructors really wanted to put in place a very hard, like, no AI, you can't use it. And I feel like we've ended up sort of like in a bit of a whack-a-mole problem, in that like that kind of blanket, just like you can't use AI, has seemed really, really hard to enforce. So I guess, my advice would be to kind of like think about how to deal with AI, because I think if you don't, it can quickly become like a big distraction in the course.
I just want to echo, I do the same thing as well, where I actually have them use ChatGPT for a couple of assignments. So it's like, I know, we all know, I love that. Yeah.
I let them know that I can see most of what they do in Canvas. I mean, like, I just tell them, like, I'm the Eye of Sauron. I can see. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it to necessarily be intimidating, but I think that there's an awareness relative to all of the other platforms we are on, that surveillance is there.
And I also, we're working as a department and the teaching faculty with incorporating AI differently, because I'm also an academic integrity facilitator for Rutgers. And so I've had to deal with cases where they're using AI, they're using ChatGPT or whatever to study, to learn more about a topic, but they're not putting the information in the assignment. And so talking about the different ways in which to use it. And so that blanket, just to, agree with you, Julie, that blanket statement of not using AI, it is useful in other ways. And so it's a matter of how to use it appropriately versus plagiarism. So incorporating that and kind of viewing all aspects of that is an important concept.
Thank you all for those contributions. And I think this conversation about AI just shows us how online teaching and learning is evolving. And I guess that's also the same for in-person teaching as well. But I just want to reiterate these excellent points. I know Ashley mentioned strong organization, like having a clear module structure, consistency, can be really helpful. And not only for the students, but for us as well as instructors, right? We don't have to recreate the week every module. We have our own structure to just plug in and try again. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Leaning into the whole humanizing aspect of, being flawed. Growth mindset and transparency too, being really clear and upfront with students about what we can see on our side of Canvas and our expectations, and even just bringing the conversation of AI, what it is and how we're supposed to use it. These are all ways we can be transparent with our learners. So this has been incredibly rich advice from you. So thank you so much. And we do still have some time, I think. Is that right, Eliza, Dina?
Yep, we still have some time, so we can start to maybe draw on some questions from the audience. Oh, good. Dina said 15 minutes.
Great.
So I see Dave, I'm going to highlight this message from Dave Sperling. He asked it a little earlier. Do you tend to have students submit assignments as private or more as forum style entries where everyone can see what others are doing? And he's asking this for projects.
I would say that I don't generally have big projects, and so with the exception of the things that are discussions and meant to be interaction between them, everything is very much a private, personalized. I'm the only one that sees it, unless it is something that is meant to have multiple group work or interactions. But if it is a solo assignment / grade, then it's private. No one else has to see it.
Yeah, I have discussion posts are exposed, but you have to write your own post first before you see other posts. Weekly wrap-ups are private. And then I would say other assignments are essentially private. The group assignments that are assigned are private, but most of them you will hand in, or I would say a good number you hand in as a group. But I do have individual grading set on there because obviously there are group members who drop out or who are not responsible. So I make sure that group members put their names on the assignment so I know who did what. And obviously, even if the assignment is registering for a particular group member, if I don't see their name and if I hear feedback from their group members that they're not participating, they're getting a 0 while everybody else is getting full credit on those. So within the group, they are able to see the assignments.
Yeah, I just chime in kind of echoing what I'm hearing from other people is I have just found like diversity of different modes of engagement and assessment to be particularly important in these courses in terms of like really getting a range of students to feel like they can kind of like shine in their own way. And so I've tried to sort of, I think sometimes online courses can have this almost like repetitive structure in which every week you're supposed to post like a comment to a forum. And I started to hear from students that they were getting really bored with that. And so I've tried to really like mix it up almost with the idea that like each week they're like, what are we going to be doing this week? And so like a mixture really of like public assignments, private assignments, but also like, you know, some are in writing, some are like, you know, to submit an image or a short video of like a student who like reacting like through those mediums. So like I've just tried to be as diverse as possible.
It's something that I haven't, it's an idea that I had when working with Pauline and Eliza, and I have not been able to get it fully there. I would ultimately like to be able to have something that's like a choose your own adventure style, where there are a number of things that they could go in and the order almost doesn't matter, that it's all scaffolded to the final project, and whatever order they take it in, it's a personalized experience. it's proven to be a little bit more difficult building it than I conceived in my head, but it's getting there. It's getting there, semester by semester.
It's good to have goals, right? Things we're working towards. So next, there's two comments that are two questions rather that are sort of in the same vein. Dave Sperling and Heather's both asking about classroom size and engagement and finding a balance so students are engaging in various ways, but you're not feeling overwhelmed on the grading side of things. So if anybody has any thoughts about engagement strategies and the size of your class, you can share your thoughts.
I'm going to pop in because I have a large class. My enrollment for my online dinosaurs in a normal summer session tends to run between 100 or spring or fall tends to run between 125 and 150 students. So my engagement tends to be a little bit less than what I would do for a much smaller class. Even my in-person classes is large enrollment, but having those numbers, I tend not to do as much of the big group assignments because it's hard to separate out 125 people into groups and keep track of that. So I do a lot more of the discussion engagements, the video post, and that's my way of managing that. And in terms of kind of not overwhelming, because I do have 125 things to grade for each student, and if I have multiple sections, that's another thing. I utilize Canvas a lot. I do auto-graded exams and video lecture quizzes, but things that auto-grade to take that off of myself, because I do have other things that are written assignments that utilize rubrics and other aspects of learning that do require my input. And so I take some from here and put it there. So I have engagement in certain aspects that require more of my input, but then there are other things that, yes, they still need to know this. They still have to take an exam, but it's going to be auto-graded by Canvas, so I have more time to devote to the more engaging things. So I just kind of take it from there. But I haven't actually done a smaller class to really online to say that I could do it better.
I have 30, and I would say it's still pretty hard, to be honest. And luckily, some of that gets reduced because they're put into groups, but also like, you know, I've been hovering more. I used to have 22 in person for this class. And again, we're working through statistical software. So now I have 30 plus, depending on those who are getting in with SPNs. And, you know, meaning I probably have at sometimes like 10 groups of 3. So it's essentially managing 10 different mini projects who are real clients of ours on top of everything else. So it is difficult. I totally echo Crystal with the auto grade quizzes. And Crystal, I'd love to talk offline, because the one thing for me is I do go back and manually grade them, because if you have anything but a multiple choice, you could have, you know, errors that are auto graded with fill in the blanks, or obviously if you have written responses. So that's always a catch, and calming the kids down. Like, you did not get an F. It's just that, you know, not everything can be auto graded. So, but I definitely feel like that does reduce the workload. And then obviously the group projects that are not individually graded, the few of those that there are, that does reduce the workload as well.
I feel like it's tough with written assignments because I want to put the personalized comment into it. And there's we don't want the students using AI, and we shouldn't be looking at their papers with a kind of AI lens to say, okay, do it for us. There are some things that can be automated. Some things, frankly, should not be. And actually, Eliza, I got this from you, using video comments for papers. Not necessarily like the final project. Well, I'd like to type that out, but a video comment can kind of like highlight an area, and if there's problems with the writing, but also it's an interesting way to get at the AI question. Because if you're reading something out loud and you're saying, okay, stylistically, what does this feel like? Or this sounds awkward when I read it, you know, or you're using this phrase over and over again. It does something, again, kind of humanizing, personalizing. I don't know if it's actually faster though. I don't know if it's faster.
I see Brian asked, how do you do video comments in the Canvas gradebook? Did you want to share how you approach that, Tom?
There are two ways. Like, there's the ability in Canvas to like record something right from the grading there. I don't like using that as much. It doesn't do the closed captions well. Like, so I usually just use Zoom and record them there. Again, it doesn't necessarily save time, but it actually saves a degree of mental energy for me.
And I think we might have time for one more question. Thanks, Dina. We have 5 minutes left. And David was asking about aspects. I'll highlight the question. Are there aspects of getting students engaged that you found are easier or better facilitated online as compared to in person? So thinking about from a student perspective, someone who's very introverted in an in-person class, who's more comfortable engaging online.
I guess I'll just chime in with, I was just really struck by how much the online asynchronous courses really attracted and were so well suited for non-traditional students. And I think both like the obvious ways in which, they can adjust them to their schedules, but I think also just sort of sometimes those students can feel kind of self-conscious in a classroom in which they're a real minority. And something about the online format, I felt like I had more of those students and they were just sort of more open about sort of like sharing their experiences. So I ended up at one point, because I knew that there were some of the students who were themselves parents, like I did a little video of doing a project with my kid, like marbling paper, because it was related to the historical material that we were doing. And then like I got comments from some of the other students who were like, yeah, I did this activity with my kid as well. And so something about like the online format, I really felt like, and I had students who were working at night and who would tell me they were like listening to the videos during their night shift, and their like coworkers would be listening as well. So, we hear from the university from the top down, these courses are important for non-traditional students, but I really like saw it in play in the classroom. And that also made the teaching super fulfilling for me, because I could see that I was meeting a need, but also it's like, there's so many adults who actually have lives like me. And so I felt like that created like a connection with some of those students, because we were like, I could see there were other people in their like 40s and 50s, like in the classroom. And that was really cool.
And a quick note too, I think having the opportunity they don't have to video themselves. They can write a response. For the students that are more introverted in class, that don't like to speak up, having the ability to think about what they want to say and write it down and not feel like they're going to be judged and they're put on the spot, and giving them that kind of leeway, but also that time to really think about it. Because a lot of with our students that have various accommodations or struggles and just aren't comfortable in groups, that allows them that kind of my safety net of, I don't want to interact with people. I don't want to speak out loud. Like I have a speech impediment. It's something I address, but at the same time, I could see how someone else does not want to speak up, and having an opportunity to be like, you can type this part, you can choose how you want to present this information, but it's up to you, and giving them that ownership of it.
Great, thank you. So it looks like there's one more question that came in. Do you tend to break your weekly lectures into multiple subunits by topic, or keep each week in a single unit? I'm sure this is particular to the content you're each teaching. All right, great. Thanks, Julie. She shared she keeps videos 3 to 8 minutes long, right? We know the attention the attention span is not much more than that, but we can sort of chunk it into shorter video lectures. So we're just at the 1 minute mark, and we just want to reiterate how grateful we are that you all spent your time with us. And another huge thank you to our panelists here who have taken time out of their day to share their experience with all of us. We're really grateful for everything that you've shared today. I'll just share on the screen our email address if anybody has any questions. Sorry, I can't talk and share at the same time. If anybody has any questions or comments or thoughts, please reach out, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference today.
Yes, nice to see you all today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much to our panelists. That was really rich. Thank you.